first up, we cut across to breaking news. Coming in, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has just landed in Tianjin in China for the SCO summit, the much-awaited summit, and most importantly, the bilaterals that are scheduled to happen. Prime Minister Narendra Modi to meet with Chinese Premier Xi Jinping and also to engage in a bilateral with Vladimir Putin. That is to happen on Monday. Prime Minister Modi's much-awaited visit that has begun as he has landed in China. Shortly from now, we'll get you those pictures of Prime Minister Narendra Modi landing in China, and of course the program that is slated as a part of his welcome, where he is also slated to meet with the Indian diaspora, and of course a cultural program that has also been planned to welcome Prime Minister Narendra Modi in China. He is in China, in Tianjin to be precise, for the 25th meeting of the head of states of the Shanghai Cooperation Council, that is the SCO summit, to happen on the 31st and the 31st of August and the 1st of September. And those are the first pictures on your screens of Prime Minister Narendra Modi being welcomed at the airport in Tianjin in China, and of course several dignitaries there to welcome Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In fact, those first pictures only on India Today that have been accessed from inside the plane, from outside, when there was a huge delegation to welcome Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and he has just touched down in Tianjin in China for the SCO summit. The SCO summit extremely significant this time around because Prime Minister Narendra Modi is also to engage in a bilateral with Chinese Premier Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, which is to happen on Monday. Those are the first pictures of the handshakes and the namaskar that has happened right after Prime Minister Narendra Modi's plane has touched down in Tianjin in China. And there you see a cultural welcome for Prime Minister Narendra Modi as he walks down the red carpet with senior officials and dignitaries. Prime Minister Narendra Modi being welcomed in China for the SCO summit. That holds a lot of significance because remember, Prime Minister has come to China after 7 long years. This following the Galwan clash in 2020. Prime Minister had last visited China in June 2018 when the SCO summit was hosted in Qingdao, and now he has reached Tianjin for the SCO summit. Border tensions and diplomatic chill between India and China, where Prime Minister Modi's presence signals India's return to the table as a confident regional power. The aim, of course, as part of attending this summit is also strengthening the global south, India, China and Russia coming together at the SCO. And we stay with those pictures, the first pictures that have been accessed by India Today. In fact, the only channel to get you pictures from inside the plane. And right there, Prime Minister Narendra Modi walking down the red carpet as he has been welcomed by several senior officials and dignitaries at the airport. He has landed in Tianjin for the SCO summit, and all eyes on what will be the outcome of the 2 big bilaterals that make it as a part of this visit. Prime Minister Narendra Modi to meet with Xi Jinping, and the day after that he is also to engage in a bilateral with Vladimir Putin. Remember, all this is happening amid the tariff conflict that the world is witnessing, and this particular visit that holds a lot of significance because the aim is also to strengthen the global south, India, China, Russia coming together at the SCO, reflecting a strong shift with Western powers imposing tariffs and pushing unilateral agendas. India's participation shows its commitment to building coalitions that challenge outdated global hierarchies. Trade and economic leverage, of course, is the other big target to achieve because this summit may open avenues for India, a better market access and stronger regional connectivity. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's presence that adds a lot of weight to India's economic concerns and aspirations. And of course, India is looking at a diplomatic reset with China. This is Prime Minister Modi's first visit to China in over 7 years. And this has come after a lot of groundwork in order to ease tensions, visa resumptions, reopening pilgrimage routes, and revived border talks. So all this makes for a chance for both the countries to rebuild trust. Prime Minister Narendra Modi in China, as we stay with those first pictures. And I also want to cut across to my colleague Gaurav Sawant, who has been reporting live from Tianjin. Gaurav, the moment we've all been waiting for, Prime Minister's touchdown in Tianjin. He walks down the red carpet and the cultural welcome that he receives.
Very crucial visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Tianjin, China, his first in 7 years, and very important from the point of view of a multilateral visit. You remember, this is the 25th Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit. The Prime Minister here to be a part of a visit where India-China relations, they are on a mend. However, this isn't a bilateral visit in the sense of a bilateral visit in terms of the entire focus being between India and China. The focus here will remain multilateral. The Prime Minister's interactions, of course, with the Chinese President Xi Jinping, from what sources tell us, are likely to be at least 40 minutes long. He will also be having a meeting with the Russian President Vladimir Putin and with several other leaders from Central Asian republics. So this is a crucial visit when it comes to a very important regional grouping or a Eurasian grouping, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. However, do we see much moving forward on the bilateral front between India and China? Well, there are some steps that have already been taken. There are some more steps that are likely to be taken. But a major breakthrough in India-China relations, in a summit-level meeting, perhaps we will have to wait longer for that.
Continue talking to us as we stay with these pictures, because fact is that America is watching every development very closely and rather uncomfortably. What can one expect from this power play?
On the world stage, this power play is being watched very closely by the Western countries, because many analysts in the West have argued that President Donald Trump has pushed India closer towards Russia and China, something that America was desperately trying for the past 25 years. That should not happen. We were reporting the Pokhran nuclear tests, the sanctions that America had imposed on India in 1999, the Kargil war, then the lifting of those sanctions gradually, and the improvement of India-US relationship over 25 long years. When baby steps were taken, next step in strategic partnership, to the civil nuclear deal, to every government in India and in America, whether it was a BJP government or a Congress government or a BJP government again, or the Republicans and the Democrats in the United States, there was heavy investment in India-US relationship. There's something that India was very proud of, as were the Americans, that India had bipartisan support in the US Congress, as it still does to a large extent. However, Donald Trump 2.0 saw all of that being thrown out of the window, with Donald Trump not just imposing sanctions, imposing tariffs on the world, including on allies and friends like India, but also 25% penalty or sanctions, as the White House spokesperson Caroline Levitt called it, on India for buying Russian oil. And America perhaps expected India to buckle under pressure, and India did not, because India very clearly stated to the world that it was the Biden administration that had urged India to buy more oil. Prime Minister Narendra Modi stood tall at a time when you had European Union leaders, the leadership in several other parts of Asia, that was virtually kowtowing to the Americans. India did not. This is something that China is watching. This is something that Russia is watching. And this is where perhaps every country sees an opportunity for their personal gains. So in every country seeing some personal gains, is it possible for mutual gains also to happen? Now, India does not want great relations with America at the cost of China, or great relations with the China at the cost of America. And this is the diplomatic tightrope rope walk that India is doing, because India has constantly wanted better relations with every country, and which is what explains our multi-aligned policy. However, with China, you had whether Doklam in 2017 or Galwan in 2020, a relationship nosedive. Again, there's something that we've been covering very extensively. The 2014 visit of Chinese President Xi Jinping to India, to Ahmedabad, where there was a lot of warmth from the Indian side, and you had then Chinese incursions taking place simultaneously. However, the two countries were trying to negotiate relationship. Now, right now, when you look at the situation, what Prime Minister Narendra Modi is also attempting to do is to reduce the trade imbalance. $100 billion, $99.2 billion in China's favor. And India wants to, reduce that trade imbalance, export more to Chinese market. China wants India to open the Indian market even further, but then India wants more access to the Chinese market and, of course, stability at the borders, because India has made one point very clear: peace and tranquility at the borders is a prerequisite for this relationship to moving forward. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi was recently in India, and he indicated that the recent tensions at the borders were not in the interest of the people of India and China. So does that mean that the disengagement that has already happened at the borders will lead to de-escalation and ultimately de-induction of troops? De-induction may be a long way off, but perhaps de-escalation is something that the two sides can work on. It will be done at the level of the special representatives on the boundary, at the level of the External Affairs Minister, and also at the level of Foreign Ministry and Defense Ministry level dialogue. So multiple level of dialogues are currently underway. This visit of the Prime Minister is more a multilateral visit, not a bilateral visit, point one. And point two, the apprehension in the West that there will be RIC summit, Russia, India, China, on the same plane. That's not happening, is what sources tell India today. We are still waiting for an official confirmation on that. But, there needs to be a lot more groundwork before a summit can happen. And that groundwork still hasn't happened, is what sources tell India today.
Right, Gaurav, I request you to stay on with us. Shweta Singh is also joining us from Tianjin. Shweta, quickly coming to you to get a sense of what one can expect as far as the Modi-Xi bilateral is concerned. That is to happen tomorrow. What's on the agenda?
Well, if we specifically want to talk about the agenda, there's no agenda as such that is being shared by either of the two sides. And definitely there are indications that it is not to be seen as a bilateral, but as prime ministers meeting with the host nation of a multilateral platform. But since India and China have been moving ahead as far as defense concerns remain, or as far as trade talks go, as far as connectivity is concerned, we could imagine that something positive, at least the beginning of something positive, could come out of it.
All right, Shweta, stay on with us. I want to come back to Gaurav because Gaurav, while you talk about the trade aspect, and we will harp on that in greater detail, but the border situation is something I'm wanting to understand more. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit coming after 7 years, how is this to impact the situation at the LAC, and how much of that will figure as part of the bilateral that is to happen between India and China? Most importantly, can there be a realistic reset of ties between the two nations when it comes to the border situation?
So reset may be a long way off. There's a thaw, yes. A reset, no. And for a reset to happen, will there be a restoration of the April-May 2020 situation is still a long way off. What's the current situation along the line of actual control after the 2020 Galwan and Pengong standoff, which actually escalated then to multiple friction points? So post the summit at Kazan, which I was reporting from ground zero in Russia, both the Chinese president and the Indian Prime Minister, they decided that there will be forward movement, which led to disengagement at the remaining two friction points. There were multiple friction points along the line of actual control. In most friction points, while disengagement had already happened, but here there was a strategic, nod that was required from the heads of state and government for the disengagement to happen. So while the troops are now no longer in eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation, there is a buffer zone of sorts that's been created, and that buffer zone of sorts indicates indicates that the Chinese side moves back a little, the Indian side moves back a little, and they do not, come face to face. There'll be new confidence building measures. There'll be new border mechanisms that will be put in place. There is some talk that's happening on what those new confidence building measures can be. That is being decided not just at the level of the SRs or the special representatives on the boundary. It's Wang Yi on the Chinese side, member of the Politburo, External Affairs Minister of China, and the special representative on boundary talks, and Ajit Doval on the Indian side. And you have the External Affairs Ministers level dialogue that's happening. You also have dialogue that's happening at the level of border commanders, the co-commander on the Indian side and the Chinese commander on the Chinese side. So there are some initial steps that are being taken, not yet to the level of confidence where the 50,000 plus troops that are deployed on either sides can be withdrawn. A lot of infrastructure has also been created, both by India and by China in Tibet. India has it in Ladakh. You have additional airfields, additional bridges, additional soldiers deployed, their billets, their barracks. A lot of that has now been created. Now, do those constructions now end up becoming permanent, given the cold freeze in the relationship between the two countries? Will there be some thaw in the middle sector? What about Arunachal Pradesh? So there are multiple levels at which the dialogue is taking place. However, no de-escalation just as yet, and no de-induction just as yet. So de-escalation perhaps is something that they will talk about. What does de-escalation mean? That you move the heavier weapons back to its peacetime areas. Right now you have your rockets and your missiles and your heavy artillery that's deployed there. Your tanks are deployed there. Can they be moved back? Now again, China can bring their troops in much faster because they are on a plateau. For India to move them in the mountains, it takes more time. So it has to be equal and mutual security guarantees have to be put in place. So China has to move back even further than India because China can redeploy faster. It would take more time for India to redeploy. Many complex factors that are being put in place. For that, a mechanism is being put in place. This dialogue that happens at the level of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi Jinping is to give that strategic direction to that dialogue to take place. Trade, economic cooperation, people to people, the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra has recently resumed, direct flights are resuming. So some steps are being taken. Trade deficit and imbalance, how does that get addressed? Those are some issues, the higher direction for which comes now, and then subsequently you'll have ministers and interlocutors who will take it forward at various levels.
Right, Gaurav, stay on. I want to, in fact, take the same point to Shweta and her understanding on her interactions with the Chinese there. Shweta, by and large, while Gaurav explains the situation at the LAC, lot of factors that need to be addressed. And the trust deficit that has been there as far as India and China are concerned. How much can the two really work together and come and find a middle ground?
Yes, why not? I think everybody in India and everyone in China will be wanting that to happen. See, China has started with constantly stressing on the fact that confidence building measures from the side of China have started. They talk about the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra, which has resumed after a long gap this year. And they're trying everything to make it a success, taking care of the devotees who reach there. So these are certain things that can be dismissed as optics, or if you look at the constant talks that are going on between the defense of both sides, as well as the special representative talks, I think it won't be wrong to assume that it will be the beginning of something very positive in India-China relations.
All right, Shweta and Gaurav, do stay on. We stay with those pictures. Prime Minister Narendra Modi in that rousing reception as he's touched down in Tianjin in China for the SCO summit. Gaurav, I want to come back to you because you were also talking about trade and economy between the two nations. One aspect that is being looked at very closely is, of course, India's trade deficit with China that remains alarmingly high. With Prime Minister Modi's visit, the push for greater market access for Indian goods, how do you see that happening?
So far it's actually been in the past, it's almost like, banging your head against that China wall. China doesn't say no, it doesn't say yes either. The deficit is almost $100 billion. $130 billion is what the trade between the two countries are. So India's effort has been to reduce that deficit to increase the exports. Now, when the relationship went south, you also saw China stop the export of magnets, rare earth minerals, fertilizers that were required, tunnel boring machines that are required. And those tunnel boring machines are really required for infrastructure development and India's big infrastructure push. So when the relationship started improving gradually, so fertilizer supplies, they are resuming, rare earth minerals and magnets, their supplies are resuming, tunnel boring machines will once again come into India. But then these were problems that were just created and a problem has just been found in the last couple of years. The legacy problems that issue, and I'm not talking about the boundary issue, I'm talking about the trade deficit, because that's also from $60 billion trade deficit to 80 to 100. It just keeps increasing and it's increased more post-COVID. So how does that get addressed? There are many aspects to it which both sides are working on. India is seeking greater access to Chinese markets. There are a lot of regulations here that we are seeking, more transparency. China is quite opaque in many ways. So that opacity, can that be reduced? Can more Indian goods and services be exported to China? What are those areas where India can contribute more? So there are some steps that are being taken when India negotiates, and India is actually trying very hard, especially in this situation. And then this is a situation that China also realizes that India has been able to stand up to American President Donald Trump's bullying tactics when it comes to 25% additional tariffs, and those tariffs, some argue, may go up even further should India not kowtow to America, which India is not doing by all indications. This is an opportunity in an adversity even for India. So does this work out to be an opportunity when it comes to India, China, Russia, the global south, looking at newer markets? There's a lot that's at play here. But at this particular meeting, it's at a multilateral level. This meeting is more about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, where India is also working big with the Eurasian market. Now, India's engagement, whether with Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan, or Azerbaijan, with Azerbaijan, of course, we saw a relationship go south, Azerbaijan, Pakistan and Turkey during Op Sindoor. But, in that region, India is trying to, make more headway. Very successful with Russia, very successful with Kazakhstan, with Uzbekistan, with Turkmenistan. There are 20 countries that are here right now. So there is some effort at multilateral level. Counter-terrorism is a very important aspect in which the two countries are moving forward, and these two groupings are moving forward. But then you have a state sponsored of radical Islamist terror, Pakistan, that's a part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So will the countries unite and call out Pakistan's state sponsored radical Islamist terror? Because this is a grouping that was actually formed to combat terror in all its forms and manifestations, and India's big effort has been that cross-border terrorism should be highlighted here. So it's a constant battle. Everyone's putting their shoulder to the wheel. Let's see what comes out of it.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And in fact, Gaurav, the last point that you made, I want to discuss that with you in greater detail. But before that, let's also tell our viewers the opportunity that you were talking about. And if it turns out the way, how can it be a win-win situation for both India and China? So, considering that happens, what are the possibilities? One, of course, both are seeking newer markets to offset their losses. The second possibility, a possible push for greater South-South trade, which both nations are eyeing. The third possibility also could be that China may offer India trade concessions, and that is certainly something that India is looking to solve. The fourth possibility is that India gains leverage in negotiating US deals. Remember, China is equally troubled when it comes to the kind of tariffs that have been levied by the US, and India looking to better those negotiations. And the fifth possibility, India and China to reduce their respective reliance on the US market. So we wait and watch how that happens. But in the meanwhile, more breaking news coming in. Let's cut across to it. We're learning of how China plans a military parade post the SCO summit. China's military parade that is being planned in Beijing. Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif will also witness this parade, is the information coming in. Pakistan Prime Minister is all set to witness the Gala military parade that will happen in Beijing. Shehbaz Sharif, Xi Jinping are also set to launch CPEC 2.0. Soon after the 25th SCO summit, China will be organizing a massive military parade to Beijing to celebrate the 80th anniversary of the Chinese People's War of Resistance. Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif will be witnessing the Gala military parade being held on the 3rd of September 2025 in Beijing. Pakistan Prime Minister will in Beijing for his state visit to China after participating in the SCO summit in Tianjin. President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Sharif of Pakistan will jointly launch CPEC 2.0. SCO Summit will be the first international event where both Indian and Pakistani Prime Ministers are participating at this event. Gaurav, I want to come back to you to get details on the military parade and most importantly, Pakistan's presence at the SCO Summit. Shehbaz Sharif is there. We all understand how concerning China and Pakistan's closeness is, especially when it comes to CPEC and its implications.
Well, CPEC or China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, India's reservations with the Belt and Road Initiative was that it's a violation of India's territorial integrity, and India remains firm on that stance. It passes through Gilgit and Baltistan, which is an integral part of India, in illegal Pakistani occupation. That's point one. Point two, China planned to put in or invest about $60 billion in the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. It's invested over $30 billion. However, most analysts argue that China hasn't got any returns on its investment. What is worse, a large number of Chinese engineers and workers have been killed by terrorists in Pakistan, and the fact that there's been large-scale corruption in Pakistan. There's a lot of that money that Pakistani generals and political leaders, they've taken Chinese money, invested it overseas, whether in the Middle East or in Europe or in Canada and America, and built empires for themselves. The people of Pakistan are poor and the people of China have suffered. So that is something that China is very upset about. Chinese investments further in CPEC 2.0 at a time when America, Asim Munir went to United States, went for lunch at the White House, and he's promised the Americans that they can mint money and mine, minerals and rare earth material in Baluchistan, which is seeing a freedom struggle by the Baluch Liberation Army. So while BLA has been declared a terrorist organization by the Americans, they intend to go into that area, which is, look, that's a region where the Chinese could not make inroads. That's a region that the Americans could not make inroads. We know when Pakistan talks about Recordake and that you'll find oil there, something that Donald Trump has also been talking about. Do keep in mind, from the 1960s till 2025, there have been at least 10 to 15 major efforts by Canada, major efforts by America, major efforts by European companies to dig oil, to find oil in that area. None succeeded, none. And yet, there is this thing that if oil is found in that region, Pakistan will become a super rich country and that they will have billions of dollars. But that's a dream that Asim Munir and before that Ziaul Haq and before that several other Pakistani leaders, they were selling that dream to the world and to Pakistan. Now America, Donald Trump has brought into that dream. He wants to invest, or Saudi Arabia and America want to invest more in Baluchistan. China, we are told, is very upset about it. Now, this is coming from analysts. We are told that when the Pakistani military leadership was wined and dined at the White House, they were given a virtual dressing down by China, saying, we've invested in you, we held your hand in a very difficult situation, and now you are going and promising all the wealth to America. So how will China view that? So there's an intense game, the big game on in that Baluchistan region. That AFPAC region remains in trouble. Afghanistan remains in trouble. So will China invest more in CPEC, and how remains to be seen at a time when America also wants to increase its investments and the ground situation remains very volatile.
Gaurav, I request you to stay on with us as we also keep our focus on the current developments underway in Tianjin, especially as cultural groups in China are eager to welcome Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Let's listen into some of those voices.
This is a very good chance for us because we practice and we learn it in embassy, and I teach them in embassy. So we have this chance to performance in front of him, and it's really our honor.
My name is Jin Shanshan. I got the Indian name Isha. My team and I are going to perform Bharatanatyam today to welcome PM Modi. I learned Santur for almost 5 or 6 years from Pandit Bhajan Sopoli here and Pandit Abai Rustam Sopoli. And I am the 10th generation of Sopoli Sufiana Galala of Kashmir.
I love Indian music a lot, and now I have lots of students, and I teach them sitar. I hope more and more people knows about Indian music and love it.
All right, Gaurav, I want to come back to you. We stay with those pictures. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is welcome in Tianjin as he's arrived for the SCO summit. Gaurav, you know, the other chatter, especially online, is regarding how India had banned those Chinese apps and tightened the FDI rules. How are we now looking at a recalibration of ties? Because some reports suggest that TikTok is already looking to hire because they see a plausible comeback in India.
Well, that is something where India has been backpedaling, and that is something where India, it had banned the Chinese apps, found them to be a threat to India's security, had argued very vociferously why those apps needed to be banned. But right now, when you're looking at improving ties with China once again, given that changing geopolitical equations, so are you looking at, which is the relationship that you need to balance more? So there is a recalibration that is currently underway. If the relationship with America goes down even further, some indications are that unless Donald Trump sees the light of day, he would want to perhaps impose additional sanctions on India. And that would have a direct impact on various sectors, whether it's gems and jewelry. Again, that's something which is very labor intensive, or textile, which is extremely labor intensive. And these are some of the areas where the impact would be maximum. So is there a way that India can then mitigate the challenge or mitigate the threat that comes from there? And this is where that you will have to then loosen, the restrictions elsewhere to ensure that India's efforts, now with the 4th largest economy, aspiring to be the 3rd largest economy by between 2027 and 2030. So when you aspire to be the 3rd largest economy, will you then need more access and then in turn have to give more access to China? Now, it is always a very complex give and take. What happens then is a decision that the government will have to take given the situation. At the same time, do keep in mind, India remains very heavily invested in negotiating with Donald Trump and his administration. India has constantly, not one word against Donald Trump from the Indian government, not one word, despite Donald Trump calling Indian economy a dead economy, or his leaders, saying that it's Modi's war. It's clearly not Modi's war in Ukraine. India is neither the largest importer of oil. The largest importer of oil, as you well know, is China. India is not even the largest importer of gas, which is European Union. And yet you have Peter Navarro and others, who will call it Modi's war. So you notice that, one, this shows India's rising stature globally, that what India does impacts the world. Two, the world expects India to take bigger steps, but then should we be subservient to the Americans and take steps that will serve the American interest? Or is Prime Minister Narendra Modi responsible for the welfare of the people of India and take steps that will benefit the Indian people first? So there is this very complex jockeying that's happening. And if you were to draw a parallel, you're right in midst of that Chakraview. There's a global Chakraview that's been put in place. America and China remain engaged, in dialogue also and against each other. There is some conversation that's happening that America and China could be looking at a G2 format, but a G2 format, many analysts argue, would be detrimental to American interests because China's ultimate aim is to be the #1 power in the world. And would Donald Trump actually want to do that, or for the past 25, 27 years, India was seen as the pivot to the American policy in Asia's pivot, and India was the key pivot in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, Donald Trump, in his first tenure, wanted to encourage it. In his second tenure, will he continue to encourage it, or will he take a step back? And what happens to the Quad summit, which is likely to, which is scheduled to happen in India later this year? We're also expecting the Russian president to visit India at the end of the year, sometimes in December. The Russian president will be in India. Prime Minister would be meeting the Russian president day after tomorrow. So there is so much that's happening in the world right now that you notice complex geopolitics, complex strategies being made. At the same time, India trying to ensure that we come out on top and are subservient neither to the West nor to the East.
Absolutely, Gaurav, and I'd also like to tell you that we have with us on the broadcast Wu Li. He's a CGTN reporter. He is present at the SCO Media Center, reporting from Tianjin. Gaurav, please feel free to come in whenever you want to ask a question to Wu Li, as I want to welcome you, Wu, and thank you for speaking to India today. Also to get a sense of how China is reporting Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to China for the SCO summit. What are the big headlines, especially with regards to the bilateral that is slated between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping? Wu, are you able to hear me?
No.
All right, not too sure if Wu can hear me. We'll try and reconnect that line with him, Gaurav, to get a sense of how this entire visit is being reported by the Chinese, because we understand how tight-knit that is, especially when it comes to China's version on many of these bilateral issues. But Gaurav, I want to come back to you. Of course, you've mentioned a host of things and how this will have an impact. Let's also understand that China too faces Trump's tariff. Both nations are looking to reduce dependence on the US markets in that sense. And China is saying that we are working towards confidence building measures. So when it comes to resuming direct flights after a gap of 5 years, also discussing easing trade barriers, also talking about reopening border trade at 3 Himalayan crossings. Is China doing its bit?
So I just want you to know, news just coming in. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has just arrived at that hotel where he's staying here in Tianjin. It's called the Wanda Hotel, and the Indian diaspora, they've traveled from across the length and breadth of China. And increasingly, if you notice, the business community, there are a large number of Indian businessmen who are working in China. They've come here in large numbers to meet Prime Minister Narendra Modi. You hear chants of Bharat Mata Ki Jai. In a moment, we will show you those visuals on your television screen. Because of strict security, because this is the SCO summit, because you have more than 10 heads of state and government who are already in Tianjin, security is so tight that, private television channels, only the Chinese state television and the host country state television, they're the only two networks that are permitted. But the people who have come here, I can hear chants of Bharat Mata Ki Jai and Vande Mataram as Prime Minister Narendra Modi is welcomed in. Chinese citizens, no, Chinese are very close to India civilizationally. So whether, it is a visit to Bodh Gaya in Bihar, where they feel this spiritual and civilizational connect to Bhagwan Gautam Buddha, and it's not just the Tibetans, even across China, when you talk to them, they want to visit Bodh Gaya, they want to visit Sarnath, they want to visit, Lama Yuru, they want to visit other parts of our country. So civilizationally, India and China have been very close.
Yes.
Spiritually, they've been close. Tourism-wise, Chinese love coming to India. So when you look at these images, civilizationally, they want to connect a little more with India. Trade-wise, the two countries remain connected. People-to-people ties have always remained warm. except, of course, you've had friction at the borders, which is very, very unfortunate. And that's something that leaves a bad taste in the mouth when you talk about otherwise a very beautiful relationship.
Gaurav, I request you to stay on with us. We are also waiting for those pictures to come from the hotel where the Indian diaspora is getting a chance to interact with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In the meanwhile, I'm being told that Wu Li is back with us, that connection that has been re-established. Wu, thank you for speaking to India today. I believe you can hear me this time around, Wu. Really wanting to get a sense from you on how China is looking at Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the SCO summit with regards to the bilateral that is planned between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping. What are the big headlines in China?
Exactly. Thank you for having me. We are now in the media center. As you can see, many journalists are working here to wait for the grand opening of this Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit to be held from August the 31st to September the 1st. And actually, as you mentioned, Prime Minister Modi has just arrived in Tianjin. And this is his second attendance to the SCO after the 2018 SCO summit, which was held in Tianjin. And now it's also his first visit into China in 7 years. And actually, Prime Minister Modi met with Chinese President Xi Jinping last year in Kazakhstan. The two leaders have reaffirmed that two nations should focus on bilateral relations, boost economic ties and cultural exchanges. Now this SCO provides a very great platform for both countries and also its SCO member states, observer states, as well as global partners. We know the India and China have been the member states of SCO and also the BRICS organization, and also the two countries have been a member of the G20 organization. That through these kind of platforms, the two countries are aiming to boost their bilateral ties and boost economic connectivity, and especially the cultural and people-to-people exchanges. So over the next 2 days, these global leaders are expected to sign and approve a Tianjin Declaration, which will focus on the SCO development, especially for the next 10 years, because we know the SCO has been built in 2001. It has been around for 24 years. And what's next for the next 10 years, especially when it comes to security, as well as economic connectivity, multilateralism, and international collaboration. Especially today, China, India, and both two of the largest developing countries in the world. And the world is facing many challenges, including unilateralism, tariff, and protectionism.
You know, Wu Li, you're at that media center, and it's quite a grand media center that's been built here. If you can hear me, we're also at Tianjin. We are at Prime Minister Narendra Modi's hotel, Wanda, where he is. I want to understand from you, what are China's expectations from India when that one-on-one meeting takes place tomorrow between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping?
Of course, China has always been attaching great importance to its neighborhood diplomacy, because China and India are neighbors, and the two countries had a very long friendship. And now, over the past few years, the two countries had a very good relation, and also the two countries have been decided to push forward the bilateral relations. And now, especially this August, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi paid a visit to India. And this summer, India Foreign Minister and also its Defense Minister also visited China. Because this kind of high-level meetings have been expected in the recent months, and two countries decided to move forward to expand their relations. So in the next 2 days, these two leaders of China, India, as well as other SCO member states, are expected to sit together. The showing to the world that they can sit together and to expand the collaboration to boost the multilateralism as well as the global organizations.
Okay, so multilateral level, China and India are cooperating at multiple levels. When it comes to American tactics and American bullying, America is imposing sanctions on China. Of course, they've given China a 90-day period. They want China to reduce importing oil from Russia. What is President Xi Jinping's thinking? What is China's thinking on American unilateral taxation?
That's a very interesting question because, many countries have suffered challenges from the tariff, protectionism, unilateralism. And, China also is now paying great attention to boost multilateralism because as two of the most populous countries in the world, China, India, and also because this time Russia's president Vladimir Putin is also expected to come to attend the SCO summit. And these countries, developing countries, are coming together. They know that unilateralism will stop the whole world economic growth. Only global collaboration and will pave the way for global growth. So they know free trade because this kind of developing countries have benefited a lot from free trade, from economic exchanges. Now they want to show to the world that coming together and boosting the multilateralism and also economic collaboration is the only way forward. That's why I think a lot of countries choose SCO, choose G20, BRICS, APEC, and other global platforms to boost collaboration. They know that they have to sit together and uphold this kind of collective actions so that they can build a community with a shared future for humanity. So that's the key for globalization.
Okay, and the border tensions between India and China, before I, hand it over to our studio in Delhi, the border tensions between India and China, what is the Chinese thinking on that? What's the way the two countries can move forward on the situation along the India-China line of actual control?
You're right. We know that people, in different countries, they say different languages. They have different cultures. And for the border, many neighboring countries have this kind of minor disputes because last year when President Xi Jinping met with Indian Prime Minister Modi in Kazakhstan, the two leaders said that this kind of minor dispute shouldn't, stop the great relation between the two countries. And after that, the two foreign ministers, as well as border disputes, they have set up a special, mechanism called high-level exchange, for this kind of border disputes. So representatives from the two countries are now coming together. They sit together and they talk and they negotiate and they want to settle this kind of disagreements. They want to show to the world that this kind of minor disputes will not affect the bilateral relations. So from the top level, from the foreign ministry and defense and other high-level ministries, we can see that the minor disputes have now been handled carefully. And now the two countries want to move forward. They want to focus on international, collaboration, economic connectivity, and people-to-people exchanges.
Okay. Very interesting, Wooly, for joining me here with your perspective. Wooly of the CGTN for joining us here on India Today. Many thanks. So the situation, as you noticed, from the Chinese perspective, improved relationship, economic cooperation, greater access to Indian markets. From the Indian side, the point remains peace and tranquility at the borders essential for the relationship to move forward, and greater access to Chinese markets for Indian goods reduce that trade imbalance that hurts India so drastically.
Right.
Will there be forward movement on these very critical aspects? We stay on this big story, but for the moment, over to you in the studio, because that's one way that we can actually think about whether there is forward movement or this is just intense jockeying that's taking place.
Oh yes, absolutely, Gaurav. The same point you mentioned, and I have been reading about it. Is this mere symbolism, or can this be a turning point when it comes to the power play that we are talking about?